Today's story was written by Reddit user Unseen. Warning, tactical orbital insertion, T-minus 5 minutes. The automated voice filled the hangar. Rayek was watching the 176th Airborne of the United Terran Expeditionary Corps scurry to their assigned stations. This was the first time an Alliance observer was allowed on a Terran warship. The Tourist was a Normandy-class heavy transport cruiser built with one purpose only: rapid transorbital troop deployment. Cheers and laughs could be heard all around. Maniacs, Rayek thought to himself. Don't they understand planetary infantry assault on a fortified planet is suicide? Why are they so eager to get killed in this pointless exercise in futility? It was common consensus between all Alliance species that there were only two ways to overcome a fortified planet's defences. One was to siege the planet and hope that you can starve it out into a surrender while fending off the relief forces. A cost-ineffective tactic that ties up a sizable portion of one's fleet in one system. The second was quite effective, but left the planet barren and uninhabitable, making it completely pointless in the first place. There are only so many habitable planets. Trying to land troops on the planet's surface was pretty much unthinkable. Any dropship reaching the atmosphere would be immediately intercepted by planet-side defense installations. Orbital bombardment was made mostly fruitless by huge energy shields, usually covering the planetary defences, and thus the conflicts usually came down to pitting fleets against each other, with the loser being the first one to retreat or surrender. The status quo lasted a millennium, and would have lasted even longer if the Alliance never encountered humans. When the new species was discovered, it was still in its galactic infancy stage. The humans, as they called themselves, only occupied a handful of neighbouring star systems. They were average in pretty much all aspects: no stronger than the Yugan, no faster than the Kresbil, no smarter than their Etrid. Even their technology level was somewhat lower than that one would expect from a species capable of interstellar travel. There was nothing exceptional about them apart from the fact that they managed to survive and thrive on what seemed like a death world. After gaining access to the human historical records, the Alliance Council voted not to offer the fledgling species a place in the Alliance for the time being, seeing how self-destructive they were. It was entirely surprising they managed to even make to space and not destroy themselves in the process. 30 human years later, the Zetids also discovered the galactic newcomers. This was an aggressive species whose main focus was expansion. Their culture demanded subjugation of the weak. When the Alliance encountered them, there were no negotiations. The Zetids just attacked. After a prolonged conflict, a ceasefire was called and both factions agreed to stay out of each other's way. The humans, however, appeared very weak, and so the first human-Zetid war began. It was as one-sided as one would expect. Terrans learnt that the galaxy is a dangerous place, being behind in both technology and experience in interstellar warfare, having no large space war fleets or planetary defences. The humans lost 3 habitable worlds to Zetid occupation forces, and were forced to retreat back to their cradle world. It is not known if Zetids got overconfident or just didn't have the resources to simultaneously hold the occupied planets and invade Sol, human home system. But they only sent a portion of the fleet, and the humans managed to defeat it. Watching the conflict from the sidelines, it was decided that humans got lucky. We had no idea that it wasn't luck that helped this species. Not just yet. The Zetids are sore losers, and they came back with an entire occupation fleet a decade later. This time, they were in for a surprise. The primitive, by galactic standards, human armaments were no longer. They were on par, and in some aspects better than those of the invaders. The fleet got thinned out without achieving much. At first, we thought that one of the Alliance members secretly supplied the humans with the tech necessary to produce those, but a thorough internal investigation proved that wasn't the case. Besides, Some of the weapon systems that these humans possessed were nothing like we've ever seen before. Giant mass accelerator cannons mounted on orbital weapons platforms capable of catapulting solid objects at 4/5 of luminal speed. The Alliance decided it was high time to pay close attention to the new species development. Something wasn't quite right. In the meanwhile, the humans kept growing their fleet, churning out ship after ship at ridiculous speed. They then retook the planets they lost, but suffered heavy losses in the process, since the foe had a decade to fortify those. A decade is not enough to erect a planet-wide defense network, but it's enough to inflict heavy casualties on anyone attempting to make planetfall. Humans didn't care. They took the planets, making the Zetid forces flee. This was the end of the first human-Zetid war. It was followed by half a century of non-aggression, if you will, since there was never any official declaration or any kind of treaty. The second conflict between the two species was fought on equal footing. Zetids brought numbers, while humans had superior weapons and tactics. The same humans that were barely capable of space conflict a mere century ago were now fighting Zetids to a stalemate. The orbital skirmishes had no clear winner, and planetary assault was now impossible on either side. The worlds held by either side were fortified to their fullest. Any attempt to land ground forces resulted in burning pieces of shredded landing craft showering the planet's surface. The Zetids called for a ceasefire and withdrew, ending the Second Human-Zetid War. The Third Human-Zetid War broke out when a huge Zetid force, larger than anything seen before, crossed into human space and headed straight for their home system some 80 years later. What surprised us was the ease with which that force was dispatched. This is when we learnt how truly terrifying humans were. It had barely been a century and a bit, but they managed to not only catch up to Zetid tech, but thoroughly surpass it. Their ability to reverse engineer anything they came across is genuinely scary. We should have known that a species that managed to beat the death world they originated on into submission would be highly adaptable. Their ingenuity far outpaced anything the Alliance had to offer. The Council decided that the best course of action was to establish diplomatic relations with Terrans and then bring them into the Alliance. This brings us to a walkway in the embarkation hangar. Of the tourist. Emissary Rayek was now witnessing the sheer insanity of what these primates were about to commit. "You seem uneasy, Emissary Rayek," Master Sergeant Joseph O'Regan inquired. "Of course I am. Everyone knows you don't just assault a fortified planet." "We're not everyone," Master Sergeant mused. "But still, your dropships will be vaporized on approach." Rayek refused to believe that a direct infantry assault on a Zetid homeworld would result in anything but a disaster. "But we're not using dropships." Rayek gave Master Sergeant a quizzical look. "Look there." The human pointed towards the far side of the huge hangar where rows of conical shapes were lined up. "Those are drop pods, something straight out of our old fiction novels. Only now they're not fiction, and we have to thank our enemies for delivering the technology to make them real." "How so?" "Why spoil the fun?" He smiled. "Come, we can watch the progress from TACOP station." Rayek's jaw would have dropped if his species was capable of that, as he watched hundreds of tiny drop pods speeding towards the planet's surface without slowing down. A few indicators depicting pod status went from green to red on the display to the right, as the pods caught a stray AA shot. But the vast majority of them remained green. "Passenger to tourist, planetfall made, ready for sightseeing," a voice came from the speakers. "Roger that, passenger. Welcome to Zetid Prime. We hope you enjoy your stay. Proceed to the objective. Give us that window to land the second wave." Rayek was lost for words. The pod board indicated less than 1% was lost during the descent. This was unprecedented. a heavily fortified planet was breached so easily? How? The pods are made of improved durasteel compound. It's tough enough to stay in one piece when hitting the ground. We also managed to miniaturize the gravity generator tech to make sure the troops inside don't get liquefied on impact with the surface. Master Sergeant O'Regan seemed to know what the emissary was thinking. Miniaturize the gravity generator? Rayek didn't even think that was possible. The technology behind it made it impractical to make one smaller than the pods the humans were using in this operation. Yes, O'Regan nodded, though due to the power and operational parameters they only last a few seconds before burning out, enough to negate the thousands of Gs of the ground impact, which is all it needs to do. There's a saying we humans use, if you want peace, prepare for war, and we've had 80 years to prepare.